Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Jen Mercer-Doms. I'm the Vice President of U.S. Development with Mayshad Choice. We are an ecosystem of brands for women by women, champion equity for women, and all things related to how we develop ourselves professionally and personally. Today, we bring you our Women and Money series, and I'm thrilled to be speaking about something that is so near and dear to my heart, as I know it is to Nez's as well, all things related to social change, philanthropy, and using capital to drive good. We have two incredibly fabulous thought leaders, experts, and entrepreneurs with us today. But first, I'd like to introduce Neza Alawi, our founder and CEO of Mayshad Choice. Neza, welcome.
Hey, Jen. I'm Neza Alawi, founder and CEO of Mayshad Choice, the New York-based company that empowers women on a daily basis. Mayshad Choice produces and moderates a series of rendezvous for smart, generous women to connect, share, and support each other. Paired with our women's networking platform, Choice is a trusted ecosystem that constantly invests in developing personal and professional opportunities for its network. I'm thrilled to be here today.
Thank you, Neza. Please, for all of our viewers out with us today, we are live streaming, as you know. Please follow us on joinmayshad.com. That's joinmayshad, MAYSHAD.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please make sure to address all your questions and thoughts and ideas as we continue our program today. We will host our Q&A section at the end. So with us today, we have two incredible women that we've met and have become vast allies and advocates and champions for the work that they do. I would like to introduce Leslie Samuelrich first, who is the president of Green Century Capital Management. Leslie leads Green Century Capital Management, focusing on the firm's investment strategies, business development, and impact investing program. Leslie has more than 25 years of experience in ESG investing, corporate engagement, and environmental and public health advocacy. As a thought leader, she's appeared in the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, the New York Times, Barron's, and many, many, many other outlets. She currently serves on the board of directors for the Forum for Sustainable and Responsible Investment, USCIF, and the advisory board of the Intentional Endowments Network. She was honored in 2019 with the SRI Service Award for her leadership and collaboration with other SRI industry experts. Lecturer and public speaker, Leslie was also selected as one of the 43 world-changing women in conscious business in 2020. Congratulations, Leslie, and welcome.
Thank you, Jan. It's great to be here.
It's great to see you.
Great to see you.
And welcome to Ellen Remmer, who is the champion and founder for Invest for Better and senior partner with the Philanthropic Initiative. Ellen is a champion for philanthropy, impact investing, and social change. She is the senior partner at the Philanthropic Initiative, a philanthropic advisory firm that pioneered the field of strategic philanthropy advising. For over 25 years, she's helped philanthropists create transformational results and served as a president and CEO of TPI from 2007 to 2012. She now leads Invest for Better, and I encourage everyone to check out her site at investforbetter.org, aimed at mobilizing women to activate their investment capital for good. She is the president of her family's foundation, which supports girls' empowerment and sustainable fisheries, which I can't wait to hear more about that as well. She serves on the board of Prosperity Catalyst, a nonprofit organization that launches women-led businesses in conflict-ridden countries, and is the member of Oxfam Leadership Council. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So, we're in such an interesting moment in time, as we all know, and as we think about what's happening right now and what the future holds, the concepts of ESG, sustainability, impact investing, no doubt come into many conversations that we have as we think about what we can do to mobilize ourselves, our communities, our organizations, and our corporations to lead social change for the betterment of everyone now. So before we begin, we know that our audience is filled with corporate executives, women and men, entrepreneurs and business owners, many of whom may or may not be familiar with what impact investing, ESG, and SRI are. Let's start the conversation by providing that framework just so we can level set the conversation. Leslie, share your perspectives on this first, and then we'll go to Ellen.
Sure. And I think it's a great way to start it because it can be confusing, and people use the words interchangeably to mean different things. So first, ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. And what that approach means is that you're looking at how a company is addressing those issues or risks, either in their operations or in their supply chain. So do they have a diverse board? That would be a governance issue. Are they paying attention to their supply chain, particularly worker conditions in factories and manufacturing lines? And the E is the environment. So are they using renewable energy? Are they sourcing places that are involved in deforestation, or just what it is that they're doing? So that's another tool in the toolbox. That is the most commonly used acronym right now, I would say, but it can be applied different ways. It can be applied as a principal way to select companies, or it can be just considered. And a lot of ESG approaches just consider one part, like the G or the S or the E. SRI, it's another acronym. The whole place is filled with acronyms. It stands for socially responsible or sustainable responsible investing. And the way we use that term is when you eliminate a certain set of companies, mostly by sector. The original ones were tobacco and gambling and alcohol. Moving through the decades, some firms like Green Century have adopted screens or exclusions against nuclear weapons, nuclear power weapons, or in our case, we have eliminated or screened out all fossil fuels. Impact investing, and I'll stop after this, I think impact investing can mean any approach. It was really first coined by people who were doing private equity investing, and they sort of have held on to that as a description of it. But more and more it's used to encompass any of the strategies, both on the investment strategy or what you might do as a shareholder to describe it. So we can get more to it, but a lot of it is you have to kind of look around a little bit. Is that
yes,
a good level set?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Leslie. And Ellen, how is it impacting the work that you do? Why are you passionate about all things related to environment, social, and governance?
Well, thank you. As you mentioned at the beginning, I have been a philanthropy advisor for many, many years. And I had this sneaking suspicion for many, many years that while philanthropy is incredibly important, and certainly right now during this disaster, it's incredibly important, it is insufficient if you really want to make systemic, scalable change. And so that's when I became intrigued by the alphabet soup of names. And that when I first became interested in the philanthropy world, it was mission related or program related investing, all of those things. But essentially investing with purpose around what you want to accomplish in society, in the environment. So that was about a dozen years ago that I decided it was time to do something about it, because there was just more if you wanted to make really big change. So that's how we, and I've been involved with women's philanthropy for many years. And so there was a natural, really pivot to focusing on helping women become impact investors, that women who have been controlling consumer spending, we actually influence more philanthropy, that too many women were kind of leaving the power of their investments on the table. So try not to get too hung up on the words and the language. Often I refer to it as values-based and impact investing. I think the important thing is a mindset, and also trying to make this accessible to anybody, that you can invest with purpose. It's not just about investing for the highest financial return.
Thank you, Leslie, for reminding us and explaining very well what those acronyms stand for. And trust me, that explanation was needed, even though we are very much, I also do work through our nonprofit, the Mayshad Foundation, with the Sustainable Development Goals. But these are concepts that always need to be reminded and reframed in the mind of people, because the full meaning of it shifts with time. As we hear it over and over in conferences, we tend to forget what was the real initial reason for it to be there. So my question is to both of you, and Ellen, if you would like to start with this situation of COVID-19, the value, we think of value-based investing now as in terms of COVID-19. With have the assumptions behind investing for social good change during this time? Have we seen a shift in inclusion, exclusions? How would you define what is happening now?
Well, thank you. There's a lot in that question. As I said a little while ago, the current moment is philanthropy, right? We're all about relief. But as we think forward to recovery and reform, which is how we want to take advantage of this crisis to, frankly, do something about all the systemic injustices that are being laid bare by this pandemic. There's a role for both philanthropy and investing. I'm finding the lines are blurring even more. You're finding even now in the relief mode that there are funds being set up to help entrepreneurs, philanthropic funds to help them get through this period. People who just need that cash flow, and whether it's loans or something. There's a bunch of things that are LISC has set up something. I'm involved in Boston Impact Initiative. So there's philanthropy there. But as we're thinking forward, of course, we're thinking about the fact that we want to have, there was momentum building from shareholder capitalism to what we call stakeholder capitalism. Capitalism that looks also at communities, consumers, that it's not all about the shareholder as queen. And I think as we're moving forward, thinking about recovery and reform, we're looking at a variety of tools, and we're hopeful if we can just keep it in front and keep the transparency, that we can accelerate that move to stakeholder capitalism. If we can start really sharing what companies are doing right now, and what are the kinds of companies and entrepreneurs that are the leaders, and that will be more resilient and more sustainable going forward. So that's kind of a broad answer.
Thank you. Leslie, do you have something to add to what Ellen just said? And maybe talking to us also about the broadening of the portfolios that investors would invest in after COVID-19 when it comes to SRI, ESG.
It remains to be seen, but what we have seen so far is that there is more movement with our funds, and people. I'm not finding myself in this position, but other people seem to have more time on their hands right now. And it is a good time to actually think about your investing. And a lot of people who speak around this frequently say every investment has an impact, whether intentional or not. So every investment you hold, whether it's in your IRA or your 401k or your 529 for your kids coming up to college, they're making an impact. And so why not look at how it's making an impact? And the one thing that has become more front of mind during this time are both what companies, how they've managed risk, and we have always said that, if they're managing their environmental and social and governance risk, it probably translates into them just managing risk. And this is an unprecedented risk to their businesses. And so some of those companies are responding and performing better in this time. And then the second, which is a little bit outside your question, but is the performance of oil and gas. Just yesterday, it could not have gotten on any lower, dropping below zero. And that, I think, is going to, and it has for the last month, made people rethink what they're doing in that industry and if their mutual funds or ETFs are supporting it. And if that's not a wake-up call to why to invest fossil fuel free, well, there'll be another wake-up call coming around it soon, I bet. But it hasn't been, it's been a moment for people to reevaluate.
Leslie, that brings up such an interesting point that, I think bears some further time just to talk about what is happening in the oil industry right now. And, from the volatile swings in the market to just how we think about the fact that there is so much oil and it's something that has to be stored, right? And so it literally leads to environmental risk. And let's talk a little bit about the linkage between environmental risk and consumption and just deforestation and how it really affects how we think about sustainability and climate change. Because I'm not really sure that we often think about how one affects the other and how it's all interrelated from even what we choose to eat.
Wow, there's a lot in that question too. Well, the oil and gas industry and the coal industry have, not just for the last year, but the last decade, has been the worst performing sector, period. And it just is really catching headlines now, but that's the fact. And it's also been the most volatile sector. And so, that can play out in returns. And how I think people are starting to think about it is like, well, why stay in this industry when maybe before it gave people comfort to be in it because it was traditional or conventional, and the reasons to invest in it financially are certainly slipping away faster than we would have predicted. But we did always say, just don't be in it, just for moral reasons and ethical reasons. Like, why be in this industry that is driving the climate crisis? And, this is Earth Week. Earth Day was yesterday, and it is on people's minds. And instead of being in that industry, why not be in other sectors that are doing things that are helping us transition to a cleaner energy economy or are part of solutions? Part of it can be wind and solar, always sort of are the poster children for sustainable investing, but there's a lot of less sexy companies that are part of the solution, companies that are doing energy efficiency and, are engaged in, more efficient refrigeration or things like that no one really sees. It's all at the sort of industrial level, but why not do that instead? And connecting to sort of what I assume are part of what you do, Ellen, is that's is part of the way you can see an impact, is just aligning it with your values. And now there's more reasons to do it, I think. And I hope this and other resources out there help people feel more educated and just willing to take a moment to look at it, and whether they do their investing themselves or they push their financial advisor to do it. This would be a good time.
Thank you, Leslie. Ellen, would love your follow-up thoughts on the interconnectedness of all of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. There are no simple answers too. I mean, even to Leslie's point, I mean, one of the things that I've been learning as an investor, I have not gone fossil fuel free. I have gone definitely tilted way away from them, but I've stayed engaged because I want to support the companies that are also the leaders in the renewables, because some of the oil companies have been leaders, and I also want to own them for shareholder activism because I really want to influence them. I'm very active in terms of filing shareholder resolutions and so forth. So, but to the point that, I mean, so much of this is interrelated, and I don't know where we're going to be going with this, but the whole interrelatedness of, fossil fuel companies, our food supply, all those supply chains, make it complex when you as an investor are trying to invest with your values, because there are often not pure plays. So it means becoming more and more educated, or working with an advisor that really understands some of that, and staying vigilant and looking for transparency in the corporate world.
Yeah, that's super important, because a lot of funds are coming, new funds are coming online, a lot by the more traditional firms, and they sound like they're an impact fund, and they're not. They might have some really environmentally or socially destructive companies in that. And I think it's important to remember the name of the fund, or the tagline, or the pretty mountain or sea or ocean picture does not indicate what's in the fund. Just this week, there's an article around BlackRock, which is the largest asset manager in the world, and they had named something an impact fund. And they had guns and tobacco in it. And that can be a choice. Like, you can choose to invest in those companies and industries if you want. You surely should not be calling it, an impact fund, which has and carries all sorts of other meanings, both in the responsible investing space and in the philanthropic space. So they got enough pushback that they changed it. But it's just to show you that the name doesn't mean it. So you got to get your advisor to look under the hood for you, tell him or her what your values are, or just check the prospectus, which I can feel the oof. And if you don't want to do that, then just call up your mutual fund and say, where do you say what you're in? And if they can't tell you, it means that it's not really a screen. They may be in companies that are better than others in a sector, like they might be in a better military industrial complex company, but we may not want to be in those at all. So it does depend on what you care about and how you want to go about it.
One very quick follow-up question, just to close the loop on this conversation, and I know that this is something that we could talk about for hours, but
Right.
Interesting, and I think is also the complexity of by which analysts use different data sets as well, right, Leslie? Because there's
Right.
also, when you take a look at Walmart, for example, if you look at Walmart as a company in a data set like Zacks is listed as a retailer. But yet, if you as an investor interested in ensuring that your investment dollars don't go toward companies that either directly or indirectly manufacture, distribute, or sell firearms, for example, you'd be surprised to know that Walmart wouldn't be deselected for that reason. And so for us as investors, how can we become more fiscally savvy and more financially savvy and just academically smarter around understanding the data set by which the analysts that manage our monies actually manage our monies?
Right. First of all, you don't need to be an analyst to figure out what you want. So just for people who aren't professional investment or financial people, there are a couple tools out there that you could use around an organization called As You Sow. They use Morningstar data, and they have one website or one program. It's around fossil fuel funds, and that screens out and rates funds, for example, on their fossil fuel exposure. But if your main concern is gender equity, then you need to use a different tool. And one of the surprising things is when some of the sort of women's funds came out, they evaluated companies based on how many women were on a board or women were in management. But it didn't encompass other things. Some of the funds have changed now to also look and incorporate that environmental, social, and governance risk. So you sort of have to decide, I think, like your top 2 or 3 pieces of it on the investment strategy. And one of the things that we do a lot of, like Ellen does, so we should talk more about it, is shareholder advocacy. And that, to me, is really where the power comes from your public equity investments. It's great that Ellen does it personally. You don't have to do it yourself. You can work with or invest in fund companies that do it. Green Century does it, as well as other responsible firms do it. And then you could always also look at just what kind of fixed income holdings. So they have community bonds or green bonds. That's another way to make impact. And then at least finally, it's like what firms are doing, what's the ownership about. So I do think if you really want authentic firms, you need to look behind the curtain to see, well, who's running it? So BlackRock or State Street or Fidelity or Vanguard, they are putting out some strategies that you might like, and you have to decide whether you're comfortable with that firm and company as a whole and whether you want to be with them. We're owned by environmental nonprofits, and our profits go back to fund campaigns there. So people who like environmental work, they get a sort of triple impact. But, we don't have a gender fund per se. So if that was the most important to you, you might not pick Green Century, or you might consider it, for example, because I'm a woman and we've always had female presidents and we have a majority of women. But if you really wanted a strategy that was the top thing, you'd pick a different fund. And so you just have to figure out, like, well, what are the top 2 or 3 things, or pick a couple different ones. Maybe you do one on environment, one on social bonds, and one on women. There's also that way to do it.
Thank you, Leslie.
Could I add on a little bit there?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Leslie. That was great. And, I think it's been a little bit of the Wild West in terms of, all these benchmarks and ranking systems, and it's going to get better. And I know the SEC is trying to find out which are the real key ones that they'll authorize. But so what we find when we in our Invest for Better circles, there's a whole process of uncovering what you own, and so many people, it's mutual funds or different funds, exchange traded funds, and that's where, as you sow, a bunch of thematic areas that you can look at, and Morningstar. We recommend you look at a bunch of them because they'll all use different methodologies, and some of them have self-reported company data, and some it's third party. It's very confusing. And then if you happen to own individual stocks, that's where it's even. Yahoo actually has something, and if you're a Fidelity client, they have something. But this is all evolving right now. But it's fascinating when you start looking at it. And then there is this issue, like. There's a group that has been around for a while called Just Capital, and I'm sure Leslie's seen too. And I've been following them because they've been looking at the corporate response to COVID-19. And I've been asking my advisors, so what are the portfolio companies doing in terms of how are they treating their employees? What are they doing in the communities? It's a little bit overwhelming, but I think that's where the bringing it to light is important. And they're trying to actually even highlight the best performers so that we have standards that we as investors will ask for, that we will demand, and that they want to compare themselves to. So there's a lot of power in there. It can be confusing, but it's actually kind of fascinating too.
I think it's fascinating. especially in this era, one of the things that I learned is that our work, which Jan, you mentioned, and I didn't address in the opening question, is that we do a lot of shareholder advocacy around protecting tropical rainforests, and we started to do it because of the climate impact. Burning and raising those rainforests is just a terrible emission. It's like second next to burning fossil fuels. And then, I personally was also motivated by protecting the habitats for orangutans and leopards and all the other animals that are there. And what we learned when COVID broke out, came from this wet meat market. What we learned was viruses like that exist in animals and they're immune to it. And it's only when we encroach on their habitats and eat bushmeat. That was a new word that I just started using yesterday. When communities eat bushmeat, that's when these viruses can jump. And so it does have us now looking at and thinking about how looking at deforestation risk in portfolios that we've been doing, and others have been helping us around the globe on this too, and working with a lot of nonprofits on the ground who are involved in protecting forests and the communities and the people there, that how now is that another risk around protecting portfolios around pandemics, which to me opens up a whole new addition to what you're saying, Ellen. So how do companies respond to workers and communities in the pandemic? And then how longer term are their supply chains and what can be attributed to them? How do we look at that? And is that going to be, is that going to rise in importance as we move forward for companies, as well as companies that are involved in solutions? So there's one company that is in one of our funds that got a lot of press in the last couple of days because they may be, onto a vaccine and other solutions. And are those the kind of companies that you want to be investing in, whether it's stocks or that? For the uninitiated, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, though I'm not a financial advisor. I'm supposed to keep saying that. Is that something that analysts and fund managers should be looking at more? I think so.
Well, we definitely gave a huge present to Earth this year, because when we look at the pictures through the lens of this global quarantine, and we look at the pictures of Earth and we see what they were just a few months ago and what they are now, we're realizing with also what is happening and how we are consuming the world right now, it is making a positive impact on Earth. And so the question is, how can company take the example of this, and as you were saying earlier, and implement it on an industrial level? So my next question is to Ellen, and it's on gender equity. And let's discuss why women still lag men in making household investment decisions, even when we may be equally sharing and bringing home income and surpassing men in controlling the budget household expenditures. Given that American women will control 22 trillion in 2020, or may we say 2021 now with what is happening, what concrete steps can we take to make sure that we're investing in a better world?
Yeah, so this question of why women have not been involved in investments is, I have to say, it's still a mystery. And the research shows for sure that women are less likely to control investments or even to be involved in investments in the household. Does get better with more recent generations. So this is actually improving. So some of this may date really from my era, my patriarchal era, where advisors, frankly, weren't even talking to the women so much. But I will say, but there are time poverty is a big issue. And Melinda Gates has written about time poverty, whether it's women in the bush or women in the United States who still disproportionately take care of household everything and children everything. And so I think in the allocation of time that it has often gone to men and not women. And this is totally my projection, but I have an MBA. I actually worked on Wall Street for a very brief period, but I came from a family office. I always found it boring. And women have always, every study shows women care about money with purpose. We all want to be prudent, obviously. I'm as cautious as the next person, but I think as women, as we go into this values-based and impact investing, as more women see the opportunity to invest with purpose beyond just the money, and to kind of reinvent the rules and be part of reinventing the rules. And I keep calling it, the traditional. It was always baseball statistics to me. It was like, okay, I get it. I just don't find that interesting. It's like, how you slice it 12 different times to Sunday. It was just boring. But now when it's about how do we make change in the world, how do we together do that? So that's my personal projection. I've never seen any research studies on it, but I really believe that will help. So that's, and in different, I think things are getting so much better. More advisors are being educated about this. There are many more products out there. So for a long time back when I started it, I had to leave my advisor. They couldn't do it. I tried. I had to go somewhere else. Now, most companies, and Leslie, I'm sure some of them do it better than others, but you can often find it. But there are still so many barriers. And so Invest for Better is offering just another avenue for people who really want to plunge in and learn more. Because if you haven't spent time on something, you're not knowledgeable about it. And women, sadly, across all fields, tend to underestimate our knowledge, right? We always do. They have done research that have shown women and men tested them against investing knowledge, and women underestimated their knowledge, but actually knew as much as the men. So there's also that. So part of the Invest for Better groups are around for those who really want to build their confidence and knowledge. And there's a bit of the helping us support each other to talk to your advisor, your spouse, or your father, whoever it is that you might be engaged with in investing.
So it is a problem of confidence and daring to take risks with our knowledge and our intuition. And women have great intuition, so maybe they would be great investors on that sense. And it would be interesting to see women's involvement in investment grow, because I feel that they genuinely care about the next generation, so they would go into impact investment and socially responsible investment. And for you, Ellen, in your sphere, your company, what you're seeing in terms of investors coming in, do you feel that the involvement of women is still weak?
There still is the time poverty question. So there is a jump to decide to do this. And if you can afford an advisor, if you work with an advisor, that's an easy way to at least jump over some of that. We're seeing wherever we are an interest in starting circles and joining circles. And then, of course, it's hard to find the time sometimes to participate. So I haven't seen the data, but I would think that we're seeing more and more women, because certainly the younger generations are getting more engaged in investing. I don't know. In my family, though, I got to say, my daughter is not involved in investing and my son is. So
interesting.
Leslie, on your end, do you see a weak involvement of women through your company?
We have some data, and what it points to is about half of the investors are women.
Oh, how?
About half. I actually thought it was going to be more when we looked, but it's about half. When there are certainly more male financial advisors, and I think that is something to pick up on what Ellen mentioned. If people listening use a financial advisor, that a lot of the financial advisors still have outdated notions about impact investing. And like you said, Mayshad, you need to trust not just your intuition, but just what you want to do. So if at first they don't want to seem like they don't know enough, and they want to prove their value to you because they're charging you to manage your money, and they'll try to dissuade you around, oh, that's a bad idea, that's more risky, that will lose you money, you should just do that with your charitable giving. And I've seen people, but especially women, whose advisors do not listen to them, ultimately move. You're paying your advisor. They should do what you want. They should not be lazy. There's plenty of information out there for them to find, including calling mutual fund companies or just doing online research, or talking to their wirehouses about what's offered. And if they don't want to do it, then you should use someone else. And maybe you can find them through Ellen's group even, or there's some other resources out there to find responsible advisors who specialize in this even, not just do it, on the side. We work with advisors of all stripes, people who fully do this to people who admit, I don't do this, but I have a client who came in and said they want to do this. It's usually a woman. And so that's how I found you. And so thank you so much. Here's, this is great information, but you don't need to call me anymore because it's just this one client. So it can work with your current advisor if you just are, trust your intuition. It's your money. You should do it what you want. If they're really, really stubborn, or it's part of a family office and it's hard to disengage, start bringing them options, going, I like this, I want to do this.
I think that there's the duality between the communication and the education for all sides of the table, right? And so when I was more heavily engaged in all things related to social impact investing, many financial advisors, if I asked to what extent are they engaged in SRI investing, their response was, we don't see a demand for it because our clients aren't asking us for it. Rather than flipping it and using that as a moment in time to become more competitively attuned to what the future holds, and being more proactive and saying, I want to become an expert in this space. Right. And so I think that and Leslie, maybe you see this in the work that you do as well with advisors, is that there's the difference between waiting for the demand to come rather than creating the demand. And that might be a part of how we think about, just in the sense of moving the movement forward as well. And I'm wondering also in this moment in time, if there's, now that we have as of this morning, 26 million Americans unemployed, right? And that number is expected to go up, maybe surpass 50 million at some point, the Federal Reserve predicts by the end of this year even. And so as we feel the effects of it, either physically from the pandemic and the illness itself, and then also just the economic effects, will that be a further driver for how we think about wanting to ensure that we're consuming and spending our money with companies that do good? And will that become a further lens by which companies are evaluated and held up to some sort of level of good corporate citizenship? And will that further drive in demand for it? And I'll just open that up to both of you for your thoughts.
I would just say that I think the biggest lesson that people get when they're joining Invest for Better Circle is just to keep asking questions. And, and whether you have an advisor or a retirement account administrator or, that you're the client, you've got money, ask them, what are they doing? Whatever I'm invested in, what is it doing? You don't even need to know anything, and you'll start learning that way. Just keep asking. If we can awaken more of us, and most of us are investors of some sort. If you've got money in a bank, what are they doing with that money? Are they investing in the local community, which is going to, or are they, using it to finance oil exploration? So asking those questions. And yeah, I don't know. I feel as though the lenses for looking at investments, it's proliferating right now. I think we're again sort of in the Wild West at the moment. The important thing is that it's becoming more transparent. There are more watchdogs are starting to ask, and I'm not sure how it will all shake out. But we're no longer looking at investments just for their financial return and liquidity. We are now looking at it through all these different lenses.
Right, and that is, I think I have 2 points. One, investing with the ESG ratings and lens, there are mega studies that show that can actually enhance performance. Mm-hmm. And we have always said that's a bonus. We're certainly looking for the best performance for our clients, but we started as value aligned investors going, you don't want to be in these kinds of industries. We understand, and we're with you on that. So we're going to provide you an option. And now there's more of those options out there. But I do think, people are going to have to be very careful already. They're being very careful with their money. And I know that just at the small level, how certain grocery stores are responding and certain retailers are responding is catching my attention just at the personal level. Like, our little tiny local place, a month ago did not have people wearing one glove and no mask. And I wrote in a comment, I'm like, I don't want to come here anymore. Like, how are you not paying attention to this? Boston is one of the hot spots, and, I'm like less inclined to go there. I'm like, you're not being that careful. So in the bigger sense, I think, some companies are the ones that are not strong won't survive this. And people will possibly be left with better choices, or, spending will be more focused on the companies that did respond more carefully and thoughtfully around when they opened, how they treated their workers, how they're part of the solution. And it doesn't seem, honestly, like this is just a one experience and then everything is going to disappear. We don't have a vaccine yet. And so and there might be more viruses that come out in later years. So I think it's going to be important. And I think people are going to think about that in all walks of their lives. And a little bit like, now that you're home more, some people are busier than ever. They're homeschooling and they're still working, but then I know some of my neighbors are, gardening and fixing their boats and having 4 o'clock, social distance happy hours on the street. So they might have more time to actually join a circle that Ellen has arranged, or I'm not sure how the structure is exactly, but you might have a little more time just to look at things now.
This is a really good segue, and thank you both, Leslie and Ellen. for your thoughts. And so we're going to open this up to questions from our audience now. So please make sure in the last remaining minutes that we have left together today to send in your questions. We have one here that touches upon, Leslie, something you just said around what comes next. And the question is, 2008 planted the seeds for the sharing economy, for the rise and emergence of fintech, and for companies like WhatsApp, Venmo, Groupon, Uber, Slack, WeWork, Square, et cetera, et cetera. We know that many of these are going to be transformed, and many of these companies will need to continue to pivot and reinvent post-COVID. What comes next? Will the sharing economy survive? And what happens for fintech again in 2020 and beyond?
I don't have a complete answer. When I think of shared workspace and things like that, I think in some areas the demand for commercial real estate may go down. I know we're operating pretty seamlessly from home, so why would we subject everyone to going on the T and being more exposed in the short term? So that I do think that there are a lot of tech companies that can emerge and offer new solutions to working and living a different way. And I don't spend a lot of time thinking about this, but how do we want to, as a whole, Americans have responded so well and in such solidarity by voluntarily wearing masks, wearing gloves, homeschooling, staying home from work, crossing the street when you're taking the walk that you need for your dog or just your own mental health. And so I think companies that think about that and respond to that need of trying to build community in whatever way that is may have a really bright future, because people want to be in community but also want to be safe.
Ellen, do you have additional follow-up thoughts to that?
What's next? I'm hooked on, like, the New York Times, the America We Need, and just holding on to what could be possible out of this. And we know that whatever is possible will take intention. It's if we just let everything do whatever it wants to do, we're not going to have the America we need. And so I think we all need to we need to have the leadership for that. Excuse me. But I think your idea, I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'm committed to doing something. And I do think the whole local community, the importance of that. I would love to see more local stores come back. We're doing all this curbside pickup at all these little places who have just jumped to the fore instead of waiting 10 days to get our Instacart thing. And, if we can intentionally decide what we want to have be different,
Right. The companies that have adapted quickly, which means they're just paying more attention. So online delivery, whatever it is, those are the ones that I'm like, oh, this thing. Just personally, I'm like, oh, I can get free shipping and free returns. I don't have to go to the post office. I'm going to buy from you right now. I need to buy a birthday present. I'm going to buy it from you versus someone who has is just doing business as usual. I'm like, you're not paying attention. I don't want to go to the post office and return this thing.
And isn't it often that what we're finding right now is that those companies who can be as flexible and nimble and as responsive and have their ear to the ground in the sense of really what's happening in their local communities are in fact very local. So we're talking about, probably not often publicly held companies, but we're talking about this more innovative startup companies who are also now facing incredible pressure because it's challenging applying for some of the small business loans and grants that are out there via the state and the local and federal government, right? We've all been there, right? And so I'm wondering, this also, I think, brings up an incredible opportunity. And Ellen, maybe this is something that you do in your work as well, in the sense of, educating particularly women who want to be a part of the solution. And no matter how much extra time that we have on our hands, like, we're all dedicated and all very committed and passionate and insistent that the world on the other side of this looks better, because so many of us do see this as a wake-up call, right? So one of the things that we did at Mayshad was to create an investor circle where we bring together women that are at the accredited investor status level to be able to come together and invest increments of money, to be able to have that advisory level access to helping us create an ecosystem for accomplished women to be able to, use capital to derive good, for example. And I'm wondering if there are other options like that out there as we think about like that really unique moment in time, which I think truly is right now, for the intersectionality of using capital to drive good at the community level for global effect. Right. And so just, throwing that out there as an idea as well, as we think through just, what does local mean now, and how are we placing local within that global positionality to really affect, better sustainability efforts, better gender equity efforts, like whatever that is that we all are, individually passionate about.
So we had an amazing my Invest for Better Circle meeting last week with one group that has some incredible leaders in it. And actually one of them is Gita Iyer, who's the founder of Boston Common. And oh my gosh, she's just incredibly eloquent around the power of voice. And she was talking with us, and we were all very inspired. And so we're gonna about writing, about doing a call for action from women investors, and about shifting that this is the time for us to lean in from a place of abundance, because we do have so much more than so many. And again, to keep writing, to keep talking about it, to shape that picture going forward, as well as the action. So I don't know what it looks like yet. I mean, we're committed to publishing something out of that group as a step, but I do think it takes intentional building of communities, and women love to come together in communities. Mm-hmm. So why not us?
Right. Why not us?
And I think it is definitely an amazing time and opportunity for women to step up, because clearly over the past 100 and even 50 years, the leadership was more masculine, and whatever is happening today is also the consequence of a world that didn't have gender equality. Maybe some decision making at a leadership level would have protected us from such a pandemic happening today. So yes, women need to influence with their way of consuming and their way of investing. And at the end of the day, isn't investing just the continuity of consuming? It's the person that has more means will choose to invest where she would naturally go and consume, and the person that has less means will still make her impact through choosing where to spend their money. And what Jan was saying is just that also here at Mayshad, we know that this is a time of opportunities, but this is also a difficult time on other hands for people. It's difficult if we're missing on the transition. It's an opportunity if we are taking the transition that is opening up for us. And so being part of those conversations now more than ever is very important, to be part of those who take it as an opportunity. So whether our company or other initiatives that are out there, it is a good time for women to be active in circles that will elevate them and support them in this transition. And definitely, I mean, if they have the opportunity to invest in such companies, these are also companies of the future, because the consequences of what is happening today will also go with an economic crisis that will again, give opportunities to new opportunities to some of us and difficulties to others, and we want to be part of the future. And so that's what I wanted to add. Do we have more questions from the audience?
Yeah. One question. This is a really good question as it pertains to just really practical, tactical advice. How can investors compare different ESG investing options in the market, the EFTs versus the more customized options? We mentioned a couple of research platforms, but let's hey, if David also, if you're listening and taking notes for us as well on the live stream, this would be a good opportunity to be able to communicate to everyone who's watching as well what those options are. So let's talk about a few of, if we're interested in ESG investing, how should we approach it? What should we look at, and what can we analyze?
Well, I would refer people to the As You Sow website. I'd refer people to USSIF, it's USSIF.org. There's a self-reporting list of mutual funds there about what they do and what they don't do. You can also look on Morningstar for some specifics. They have something called Earth badges. Mm-hmm. So they're not perfect, but they are pretty good to note how environmental a fund or offering is. And then if you are an individual investor or financial advisor, I know that you can call Green Century or go to our website at greencentury.com, and we know what other funds have as a strategy versus what we do, and a lot of investors use more than one approach. And so, if someone really wanted a gender lens fund, I would refer them to a different firm. If someone wants environmental funds and shareholder advocacy, I encourage them to look at us for. I mean, there's different options out there. And I think once you get started with some of those, you find more options if you want them and more tools for yourself.
Leslie, I also wanted to mention that I know that your Green Century Equity Fund was one of the several ESG funds that outperformed the S&P 500 in the year through market close April 9th. And you were quoted as saying, and this might be an interesting quote to get more advice from you on as well, is that you were quoted by saying in S&P Global Market Intelligence that values-based investors are stickier. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that in this context for this moment in time?
We talk about this a lot. People who are leading or incorporating their values into their investments, so more than just trying to only chase performance. In downturns like this, when everything is going down, I mean, we did better than most, again, because we're not in fossil fuels and some other sectors, both on the international fund and our equity fund that you mentioned. But say we didn't do better and we did just average, we were kind of running with the pack. The reason that people would stay is that they also know that even though it has gone down, there's another reason that they're using Green Century. They're using it because they care about the climate crisis, or they care about deforestation, or like our work on getting companies to stop using antibiotics in their meat production. And so there's another reason that they're invested, and it is more substantial for them. So they're not kind of willy-nilly in and out of things. they're making an impact. You're making an impact with every investment, but they feel good about this impact, as I believe they should. And so, it's a tough time in the market, but people feel, I think, rewarded, or they feel like there's a bigger purpose to why they are using Green Century. And we try a lot to communicate with our investors. We have a email list and do a lot of blog posts and trying to speak more on webinars so people can really see and not just have know the intention of the fund in our work, but see the results of it. So see the pictures of us in Indonesia saving tropical rainforest, or when we're at a shareholder meeting presenting a resolution, or the plastics campaign that we're funding through our profits. So, or the anti-plastics campaign, I should say, that we're funding through our profits. So people focus on that.
Ellen, this last question goes to you. How does one become an impact investor, understanding that there are multiple ways to do so, whether through investing in publicly held companies or in private companies, and there's also social impact bonds, et cetera, et cetera. How do you learn more about understanding what's right for you?
There is, I think, a discernment process that one has to do internally. If you've decided that you want to invest more purposefully along your values, and so we have some tools to help people do that around kind of your motivations, around whether you are thinking, I just want to integrate all my investments that way. This is just normal. Or wait a minute, this feels like something new and different. I just want to try it out first. Then you need to look at how engaged do you want to be. There's certain kinds of investing if you really want to be highly engaged versus, no, I want to be more passive around it, or leave that to others. You have to think through how much risk you want to take. I mean, there is still again, if you're in the public markets, you don't necessarily have to think about, there's not going to be any more risk. I mean, I think that myth is finally, it's finally over, I hope. But if you're looking in the private markets, and certainly many people get attracted to angel investing, which is the riskiest thing of all, but lots of fun. But you have to take a good look at yourself. And if you're going to do that, maybe join an angel group where you put in $5,000 or something like that. So there is a whole thing about taking a look at yourself as an investor and what's important to you. And we find, and there are easy ways to get started. The public markets is one easy way. Absolutely. But there are also, the first way I got started was through some CDFIs, Community Development Finance Institutions. So there are credit unions and CDFIs and similar things that are doing great, very purposeful, often local work. Sometimes it's international. It's not called a CDFI then, but they're, sort of 2 or 3 year bonds. One of my first ones was with Blue Hub, where it was after the last crash, and it was all around, helping families in foreclosure. So I just I began by putting a little bit aside because I was still working on my advisor, and that's when I decided to leave my advisor and go all in on the rest. So there are, and we've got tools on our website about how you get started and how you think about it. So those are just some examples.
Mm-hmm. I would just add, part of it is, I do think your advice is so on point with, you have to know yourself and what is your process and what you're comfortable with. I have seen, especially people who go, I don't have that much time right now, but I want to start doing something, is to make this year's IRA contribution to one of the funds that they found.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. You just start, and you maybe spend a year getting information from that fund and seeing how it performs and seeing what impact it has. And then maybe the next year you do it again, or you do a more, full approach. But there's different ways to do it.
That's a really good
most thing is, like, if you're interested in, if you're listening to this, you must be interested, is take a step, whatever it is. Just take a step, whether it's joining the circle, using one of these guides, checking out some websites of some potential offerings, and take a step.
It's also important to, I think, understand that you don't have to have 25,000 or 250,000. You can start with $25. Right? It's just more about the behavior and the commitment and the understanding the processes behind it, and taking baby steps into the water to help you feel more comfortable with the options that are out there. And then over time becoming more comfortable. But I do think, to this conversation today, that it's very much about, understanding what's happening in this moment in time, and seeing it also as an opportunity, and understanding the risk on both sides of it. It's the complexity of just understanding what your tolerance for risk is, but understanding that it doesn't take a substantial amount of money to minimize your risk.
Right.
Ladies, thank you so much. So we're completely over time, but we've already had so many incredible texts from our audience today saying, when are they coming back? When are they coming back? So we definitely would like to bring you back on a upcoming session of Women in Money as well. I think as we continue through the pandemic and get to the other side of it and create together whatever this new normal looks like, that we all want to make sure that from a fiscal perspective that we're staying well informed and connecting and using even more of our capital, no matter if it's through consumption or investing. And I love what Neza said about the interrelatedness of all of it as we think about, what is the new world that we want to live in, and taking this as an incredible moment in time to see it as a sign that what we were doing in the past wasn't working. And Leslie, you may remember the SRI conference a couple of years ago where Chad Myers was our keynote speaker from CNN, who said that, the biggest thing that he thought that we could do to help impact at an individual level was to quit eating meat. Right. And so it doesn't take a lot to impact change. It doesn't take a lot, but there are concrete steps that, no matter what beliefs you subscribe to, if you want to be more involved in helping to reverse climate change or being a part of our conversations around gender equity, there's enough for all of us to be able to get involved in and do together. No matter how seemingly small one person's actions may take, which is what I think his point was, is that together we can all really impact change in a different way. So thank you so much, Leslie and Ellen, for joining us today. Thank you so much, Neza, for hosting us once again. And please, to all of you out there, our next session, we have a Mayshad Women in the City cocktail event tonight, where we invite all of you to come together with a cocktail at the end of the day. And we do that on Monday evenings to start off the week, because what better way to start off the week when you're remote working than with a cocktail? And then toward the end of the week on Thursday evenings. On Tuesdays, we host our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then, of course, today you're joining us for Women in Money. And we also kick off each Monday with Dr. Risa Reiger, clinical psychologist, and also an investor in Mayshad, who helps set the ground and provide us peace and understanding and just a psychological framework for what we're experiencing right now. And if you'd like to learn more about Mayshad and continue to be a part of our network, we invite you to, again, take a look at joinmayshad.com. And please feel free to contact me personally if you would like to learn more about membership or to become an investor and actually be a part of together how we revolutionize how women connect, network, form relationships, and do business together. And honestly, support and nurture each other in that authentic way, which I think right now during COVID-19 is something that we're all looking more forward to each and every day, is how can we really help and support each other. And thank you to all the women out there today and all the men who are a part of our network and ecosystem and strong support system as well. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye.